It was 11:30 when Jonas finally gave up on trying to sleep. He lay on his back, staring at the dark ceiling, listening to the quiet creaks of the house settling in the cold winter air. Outside, crickets chirped somewhere beyond the walls, and every so often the wind brushed against the roof, making the rafters groan softly above him. Beside him, his wife was completely asleep. The slow rhythm of her breathing rose and fell under the blankets. She had been out for hours. Jonas envied her. He turned his head slightly and looked toward the small nightstand beside the bed. The faint glow of the baby monitor lit the room with a dull blue light. On the screen, their 9-month-old daughter Beth slept peacefully in her crib. Her tiny chest rose and fell. One arm was curled beside her face. Jonas let out a quiet sigh. At least someone in this house can get some sleep, he muttered under his breath. He carefully slipped out of bed, trying not to wake his wife, and padded quietly down the hallway toward the kitchen. The floorboards creaked softly under his weight. The kitchen light flicked with a dull buzz. Jonas opened the refrigerator and stared inside. Leftover pasta, half a loaf of white bread, celery sticks, an apple that had started to wrinkle. Nothing looked good. He closed the fridge and rubbed his eyes, suddenly feeling more tired than hungry. Forget it, he mumbled. A few minutes later, he returned to the bedroom and slipped back under the covers. The room was quiet again. Cold wind brushed against the house. Crickets chirped, and the faint glow of the baby monitor illuminated the darkness. Then a sound came from the speaker. A soft cry. Jonas lifted his head slightly. He glanced toward the monitor. Beth was still lying in her crib exactly the same way, fast asleep. Her mouth wasn't even open. He waited. The cry didn't come again. Maybe she hadn't made a noise in her sleep. Babies did that sometimes. Jonas exhaled slowly and leaned back into the pillow. But just before his head fully touched the mattress, the sound came again. Louder this time. A weak, trembling cry. Jonas sat upright immediately. He looked back toward the baby monitor. The screen still showed Beth lying perfectly still in her crib. Her eyes closed, her breathing slow and steady, but the crying through the speaker didn't stop. In fact, it was getting louder. What had started as a soft whimper quickly turned into a strained, desperate wail. It sounded like a baby crying in pain. Jonas's chest tightened. That's not right. He swung his leg out of bed and hurried down the hallway toward Beth's room. The crying grew louder with every step. High-pitched, frantic, almost choking, he pushed open the door and froze. The crib was empty. The crying stopped instantly. The room fell silent. Jonas felt his stomach drop. Beth? He stepped slowly inside the room. The crib blankets were crumpled, but his daughter was gone. Then he heard something behind him, a slow scraping sound. Jonas turned just in time to see the closet door sliding shut. A click. His heart slammed violently in his chest. Something was inside the closet. Something had taken his baby. Claire! He shouted, calling for his wife. No answer. He rushed back toward the bedroom door, but something was wrong. The hallway outside looked different, darker. The lights that had been on earlier were gone. The entire hallway seemed to be swallowed in a deep shadow that stretched endlessly away from the doorway, like an empty tunnel. Jonas stepped toward it, cautiously. The darkness seemed to stare back. Then the bedroom door behind him slammed shut. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. Jonas spun around and grabbed the handle. It was locked. He pulled harder. It wouldn't even budge. Claire! He shouted again. Nothing. Then something whispered from the other side of the door. A voice, low and dark. Jonas. His blood ran cold. It sounded almost like his wife's voice, but the way it said his name was wrong, stretched, twisted, like something wearing her voice instead of speaking with it. Jonas stumbled backward, his leg hitting the edge of the bed. He collapsed on the floor, then the crying started again. This time it was coming from the closet, a thin, desperate wail. Beth! Jonas scrambled to his feet and ran toward the closet. The crying intensified, echoing against the walls like it was coming from somewhere much deeper. He grabbed the handle and yanked the door again. Darkness, thick and endless. Without thinking, Jonas stepped inside. The floor disappeared beneath him. Suddenly he was falling, spinning downward through the darkness that twisted like a spiral around him. The sound of Beth crying echoed all around. Then he slammed into something cold. Water. Jonas gasped as he pushed himself upright. Shallow black water stretched in every direction, endless. The surface rippled gently under his movement. The air was freezing. His breath came out in small clouds. Far ahead in the darkness, he heard the crying again. "Beth!" he shouted desperately. His voice echoed across the water, no response. "Beth, where are you?" Something moved. A pale shape slid slowly toward him through the water. Jonas squinted into the darkness. "Beth?" The shape came closer and closer. Then the moonless black water reflected its form. It was small, white, and crawling. The thing moved on its hands and feet in an unnatural rhythm, somewhere between crawling and walking. Its joints bent the wrong way, its limbs stretched too far. As it approached, Jonas realized something horrible. It wasn't his daughter, but it was making the exact same cry. Jonas took a step backward. His thoughts suddenly felt strange, fuzzy, confused. He blinked slowly. Why had he called it Beth? Since when did he even have a daughter? For that matter, when had he even gotten married? A sharp headache pulsed behind his eyes. He pressed his palms against his temple. What is happening? The crawling thing continued moving toward him. Its limbs multiplied. One arm became two. Two became three. More joints twisted out of its body like broken branches. A long black tendril stretched from its back into the darkness behind it, like something enormous was connected to it. Jonas fell backward into the water, scrambling away in terror. The creature suddenly stopped. Its cries ceased. Then it lifted slowly into the air, as if something invisible had grabbed it. In one violent motion, it was yanked backward into the darkness. A deep moan echoed across the water. Heavy footsteps followed. Each step sent ripples across the endless black surface. Something massive was approaching. Then it emerged. The creature towered over him, at least 10 meters tall. Its body was covered in writhing limbs and twisting tendrils that dragged across the water like living ropes. Half of its enormous head was covered in dozens of blinking eyes. The other half was filled with wide, drooling mouths that opened and closed hungrily. And perched above its head, like the glowing lure of a deep-sea fish, was the small, white, crawling creature, crying softly again. The monster stepped closer. Jonas tried to scream, but his voice wouldn't come out. One enormous arm reached down from the writhing mass of limbs and grabbed him. The creature lifted him into the air, the mouths on its head opening wide, rows of teeth glistening in the darkness, and before Jonas could even make a sound, they snapped shut. The water rippled quietly as droplets of blood fell onto the black surface. Then everything went still. Outside the house, crickets chirped in the cold winter air. The winds brushed against the roof, shifting the rafters slowly. Inside the bedroom, the baby monitor glowed faintly on the nightstand. On the screen, Beth slept peacefully in her crib, her tiny chest rising and falling. The room was quiet. It was peaceful. And somewhere deep in the darkness beyond the screen, something enormous slowly closed its jaws.